When drought-stricken farmer Thomas discovers an ancient well hidden in the forest, he must choose between saving his dying land and preserving a dark secret that could destroy everything he believes about his family's legacy. The metallic tang of copper filled Thomas Brennan's mouth as he knelt beside the withered cornstalks. September 1987. The Iowa soil cracked beneath his calloused hands like broken pottery, each fissure a testament to 3 months without rain. But it wasn't the drought that made his stomach clench. It was the sound. A low, rhythmic humming drifted from the tree line, not wind through leaves, but something deeper. Something that seemed to pulse from beneath the earth itself. Thomas wiped sweat from his brow, leaving a streak of dirt across his weathered forehead. At 52, he'd weathered plenty of dry spells, but this was different. The banknote crumpled in his shirt pocket felt heavier than the mortgage it threatened to foreclose. 3 generations of Brennans had worked this land. He wouldn't be the one to lose it. The humming grew louder. Thomas followed the sound into the oak grove that bordered his property, land his grandfather had always warned him to avoid. "Some places are meant to stay wild, boy," the old man used to say. But desperation makes fools of wise men. The humming led him deeper than he'd ever ventured. Ancient oaks twisted skyward like arthritic fingers, their canopy so thick that noon felt like dusk. The air grew cooler, damper. Then he saw it, a circle of stones, each one carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. They surrounded a depression in the earth, not quite a well, not quite a sinkhole. The stones were wet despite the drought, slick with condensation that caught what little light filtered through the leaves. Thomas approached slowly. The humming wasn't coming from the wind, it was coming from below. He peered over the edge. 20 feet down, water reflected his face back at him. Clear, cold water in a land dying of thirst. But something was wrong with his reflection. It seemed to move a fraction of a second after he did, like an echo made visible. The sight triggered a memory he'd buried for 40 years. He was 12 again, following his grandfather through these same woods. The old man had stopped at this exact spot, his face pale as winter wheat. "Promise me, Thomas. Promise you'll never come here alone." "Why, Grandpa?" "What's down there?" "Water that costs more than it's worth." His grandfather had grabbed his shoulder then, fingers digging in like claws. "Some wells don't just give water, boy. They take something in return," Thomas had promised. But 12-year-old promises felt fragile in the face of 52-year-old desperation. He pulled out his cell phone, no signal this deep in the woods. The isolation felt deliberate, as if the forest itself wanted to keep secrets. The water below shimmered, and for a moment Thomas could swear he saw movement beneath the surface. "Not fish, something larger. You've been where?" Sheriff Dale Morrison's coffee mug stopped halfway to his lips. They sat in the diner on Main Street, the same booth where Thomas had eaten lunch every Tuesday for 20 years. But today felt different. Everything felt different since the well. "The old grove," Thomas repeated. "Found a well back there. Fresh water." Dale set down his mug with deliberate care. "Tom, you know that land's been off limits since your grandfather's time." "There's a reason for that." "What reason?" "It's my property. Technically, it's conservation land. Has been since 1952. Dale's voice carried the weight of authority, but his eyes held something else. "Fear? Your grandfather signed it over to the county. Permanent protection." Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. "That's impossible." "He never mentioned—" "Some things are better left buried, Tom." Dale leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Take my advice. Forget you found anything back there. Focus on what you can control." But Thomas couldn't forget. Not with his crops dying and the bank breathing down his neck. Not with the memory of that impossible water calling to him. That night, Thomas broke into the county records office. He told himself it wasn't really breaking in. He still had keys from his days on the town council. But the guilt gnawed at him as he rifled through filing cabinets by flashlight. He found the deed transfer dated October 13th, 1952. His grandfather's signature, shaky but unmistakable. But it wasn't the signature that made Thomas's hands tremble. It was the addendum. In exchange for permanent protection of the grove and its contents, the county agrees to provide the Brennan family with adequate water rights from the municipal system in perpetuity. This agreement is binding upon discovery of the well's true nature and the consequences thereof. Consequences. What consequences? Thomas photographed the document and kept digging. Birth certificates. Death certificates. A pattern emerged that made his stomach turn. Every Brennan man who'd owned the farm had died at exactly 55 years old. His great-grandfather, his grandfather, his father, all of them, exactly 55. Thomas was 52. The next morning brought visitors. Thomas was checking his dying tomatoes when 3 black SUVs pulled into his driveway. Men in suits emerged, not local, not friendly. Their leader, a thin man with silver hair, approached with the measured steps of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Agent Harrison, Department of Environmental Protection. We understand you've been exploring areas of your property that are under federal protection." "Federal?" Thomas's mouth went dry. "Since when?" "Since 1952. Your grandfather was very cooperative. We hope you'll be the same." The agent's smile never reached his eyes. "Some discoveries are too dangerous for public knowledge, Mr. Brennan. I'm sure you understand." Thomas understood plenty. He understood that these men knew about the well. He understood that his grandfather's early death might not have been natural. And he understood that his own 55th birthday was less than 3 years away. What if I refuse to cooperate? Agent Harrison's smile widened. "Then you'll join your ancestors sooner than expected." That night Thomas returned to the well. He brought rope, a flashlight, and a determination born of desperation. If he was going to die at 55 anyway, he might as well know why. The descent was easier than expected. Handholds had been carved into the stone walls. Old work, but deliberate. Someone had been down here before. Many someones. At the bottom, the water was crystal clear and impossibly deep. But it wasn't the water that made Thomas gasp. It was the chamber, hidden behind a curtain of roots. A natural cave stretched back into darkness. And carved into its walls were records, hundreds of them. Names, dates, and symbols that matched those around the well's rim. Thomas recognized some of the names: Brennan, Morrison, Harrison. The families had been connected for generations. In the deepest part of the chamber, he found his grandfather's journal, wrapped in oilcloth and hidden in a metal box. The well is not what it appears. The water grants life, extends it far beyond natural limits. But the price is blood. Every generation, one must be chosen. One must feed the well to keep the others alive. I chose myself. Better me than Thomas. But the agents grow impatient. They want the secret for themselves. They don't understand that some bargains can't be broken. If Thomas reads this, know that I tried to protect you. The well will call to you when your time comes. Resist it. Let the cycle end. Thomas's hands shook as he read the final entry. The water doesn't just extend life. It transfers it. Every year I live past 55 is a year stolen from someone else. The drought, the failed crops, the dying land, it's all connected. The well takes as much as it gives. A splash echoed through the chamber. Thomas spun around to find Agent Harrison emerging from the water, completely dry despite having just climbed up from the depths. The man's silver hair gleamed in the flashlight beam, and his smile revealed teeth too white, too sharp. Fascinating reading, isn't it? Harrison's voice carried an odd echo. Your grandfather was always too sentimental. We've been waiting for you to find this place. You're not with the government. Oh, but I am. Just not the government, you know. Harrison stepped closer, and Thomas noticed the man cast no reflection in the standing water. We've been guardians of this place for centuries. Your family has been useful, but times change. What are you? We're what your grandfather made a deal with to save his family from the Dust Bowl. Eternal life in exchange for eternal service. But your bloodline has grown Resistant. Your father tried to break the cycle. Your grandfather tried to protect you. Both failed. Harrison gestured to the carved walls. Every name here represents a choice. Serve willingly and your family prospers. Resist and he shrugged. Well, you've seen what resistance brings. Thomas understood now. The drought wasn't natural. The failing crops, the financial pressure, it was all designed to drive him here. To force him to make the same choice his ancestors had made. What do you want? Simple. Drink from the well. Accept the bargain. Live forever as our agent, and your land will flourish. Your family will prosper for generations. And if I refuse? Harrison's smile turned predatory. Then you die at 55, just like the others. And we find someone more cooperative. Thomas stared at the clear water, understanding the terrible choice before him. Drink, and he would live forever, but as a servant to creatures that fed on human suffering. His land would prosper, but at the cost of others' misery. He would become like Harrison, a predator wearing human skin. Refuse, and he would die in 3 years. His farm would fail, his family's legacy would end, but his soul would remain his own. The weight of 3 generations pressed down on him. His grandfather's sacrifice, his father's resistance, the pattern of death that had claimed every Brennan man at 55. How many have you killed? Thomas asked. Killed? Harrison laughed. We don't kill, Mr. Brennan. We simply redistribute. Every year of extended life must come from somewhere. Your grandfather understood this. He chose to take those years from strangers rather than family. The droughts, the failed harvests in neighboring counties, necessary sacrifices. Life is a zero-sum game, Thomas. The question is whether you'll be a player or a pawn. Thomas thought of his neighbors, the Johnsons, whose farm had failed last year, the Millers, who'd lost everything to an early frost. How many had suffered so his family could prosper? The water beckoned, promising an end to all his problems. Eternal life, unlimited power. All he had to do was accept that some lives mattered more than others. But his grandfather's words echoed in the chamber. Let the cycle end. Thomas made his choice. He pulled out the emergency flares he'd brought and began setting them around the chamber. The ancient wood and roots caught fire quickly, filling the space with smoke and flame. What are you doing? Harrison's composure cracked for the first time. Ending this. Thomas lit the final flare and threw it into the well itself. The water began to boil. Steam rose in impossible quantities, and the carved symbols on the walls started to glow with an angry red light. Harrison screamed, not in pain but in rage. You fool! You'll destroy everything! The balance is wrong. Thomas backed toward the chamber entrance as the fire spread. Some prices are too high to pay. Harrison lunged for him, but the creature's form was already beginning to dissolve. The fire wasn't just burning the chamber, it was burning the connections that held this place together. The bargains, the debts, the cycle of sacrifice. Thomas climbed the rope as the well collapsed behind him. The ground shook, and the ancient oaks groaned as their roots were severed from whatever had sustained them for so long. He emerged into daylight as the earth settled. Where the well had been, only a smoking crater remained. 6 months later, Thomas stood in his fields watching the first green shoots of corn push through rich, dark soil. The rains had returned the day after the well's destruction, not just to his land, but to the entire county. The Johnsons were planting again. The Millers had bought new equipment. The land was healing. Thomas had found other ways to save his farm. A government conservation grant, a partnership with a local organic food cooperative, honest work that didn't require stealing life from others. He was still going to die at 55. The family curse hadn't been broken, just the cycle that fed it. But his son would live a full life. His grandchildren would never face the choice between their souls and their survival. Some wells, Thomas had learned, were meant to stay buried. The bank notice in his pocket had been replaced by a deed, not just to his farm, but to the grove as well. He'd bought it from the county with money from the conservation grant, not to exploit it, but to protect it, to make sure no one else would ever face the choice he'd been given. As the sun set over his flourishing fields, Thomas smiled. He had 3 years left. He intended to make them count. When a desperate farmer discovers an ancient well that promises eternal life at the cost of others' suffering, he must choose between saving his dying land and preserving his humanity. What would you have chosen? Eternal life or eternal peace? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the darkest corners of human nature. Next week, we'll dive into The Lighthouse Keeper's Last Signal, a tale of isolation, madness, and the price of keeping some secrets buried. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss it.